Hey everyone, and welcome to the Weekly Marketer Podcast. Every single week, we interview deep dive experts in one of the many fields of marketing to drop huge knowledge bombs from the best of the best and teach you how to take your marketing skills to the next level. This is episode 003, and we're interviewing Maddy Osman, who is an on-page SEO queen. She's a contributor for Search Engine Journal, WPMU Dev, Kinsta, and a number of other publications. She's also a freelancer by trade, specializing in SEO and content marketing for WordPress-focused companies. Maddy, very happy to have you. Thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Well, thanks for the lovely intro, Jeremy.
You deserve every bit of it. So, I kind of touched a little bit on, who you are. You're a content maker. You're an SEO expert. You're kind of like a minor marketing influencer out in the world, right? I see you put out an incredible amount of content, always engaging with people and stuff. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Help our listeners get acquainted with you and Blogsmith.
So like you said, I run a company called the Blogsmith, and kind of my bread and butter service is SEO content writing for mostly WordPress brands, I would say. So like people who either sell themes or plugins or hosting, anything sort of around that idea. But also my technical background in web design also lends well to working with other sort of technologically related brands or sort of like software as a service providers. So those tend to be kind of the companies where I fit best with. That said, I've also done SEO content for like a carpet cleaner or lawyers, as you well know, and just all sorts of things all across the spectrum. My process is such that with the right amount of research and the right amount of back and forth with the client to understand their customers and, their pain points and things like that, there hasn't really been a topic so far that I couldn't handle without the right amount of research. So yeah, SEO content, kind of the brunt of what I do. And in terms of brands that you might recognize that I've worked with, Automatic, who's the company behind WordPress, Sprout Social, AAA, Kinsta, and all the rest of them are on my website. So
that's an incredible portfolio. And it's kind of cool how you found like just a really... I say niche, but WordPress powers something like half the internet, right? So it's hardly even a niche, but like it sounds like you found something that's really fantastic. I know you do a lot of like conferences and things like that too, and like speaking and all sorts of stuff. You're quite the person around town when it comes to this sort of stuff. So let's dive into, kind of this SEO content, right? And can you kind of give us a high level? What exactly is SEO content? What is it versus like regular content? Or I don't know, is there such a thing as regular content to compare it to?
Yeah, so I think that sometimes when I'm talking with a client, for example, they'll say, we want blog posts. And so then the next question is, well, what do you want these blog posts to accomplish? Like what's the point? Where does it fit into your sales funnel? And so then we start to get talking about, the actual reason for commissioning the blog post. I think a lot of people get stuck in this idea of you need to create content for the sake of content because everybody else is doing it. And that's just not true. Without a strategy behind the content, it kind of serves no purpose. It doesn't really benefit anyone. It becomes a waste of money, quite frankly.
The keeping up with the Jones is not a good strategy.
Not in any type of marketing, yeah. So SEO content is really content with the purpose of reaching your targeted search prospect. It also kind of ties into reaching them at different stages of the sales funnel because the keywords they use can signal their intent, whether it's to learn, to buy, to find something on your website, for example. And then, the sub goal of SEO content is to then convert that person. But a conversion might be something as simple as getting them to sign up for your email list or encouraging them to maybe get a quote with your company. It doesn't always mean that the sale is going to happen right away.
Right. Interesting. So could you dive a little bit more into kind of the sales funnel and how that relates into SEO content?
Totally. So people argue there's 3 types of intent. Google recently kind of redefined this by calling them micro moments. I want to go somewhere. I want to learn something. It's like kind of filling in the blank at the end of that I want to whatever statement. But I kind of see it as being three types of intent in general. The first one is navigational intent. So that's where somebody types in like Facebook login into search because they're just too lazy to, I guess, type in facebook.com instead. So it's just, it could be if you're noticing branded queries for your company where they're trying to find something, that could actually be a signal that maybe, you need to redo your navigation. Maybe there's a user experience problem. So it's not something you necessarily want to be optimizing for in general, but it can be something to keep your eye on and, fix if you need to. The second type is informational intent. So these are those like how-to blog posts. So maybe, if I was trying to attract somebody who would be interested in my SEO content writing services, I might write how to find, your ideal writer for your brand or something like that. So these queries tend to represent sort of like the mid funnel because they want to learn, they're interested in learning more, but they might not be ready to act. The third one can either be defined as commercial or transactional intent. This is where people are looking up like top 10 lists for like X item, so top 10 SEO content writers, top 10 economy cars, whatever. The best of might be a query. In a more sort of direct transactional intent would be promo code, brand name promo code, quote for SEO content writing, get a quote, whatever.
How much?
Exactly.
That sort of thing.
So that's when you know that somebody's like pretty much ready to buy. But the point being that you need to make content for different stages, not just the person who wants to know how to, not just the person who's ready to buy now, but everybody who kind of lies in between these different types of intent.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And so that's interesting that you're talking about stages of the funnel. I was curious if you could touch a little bit on kind of how does Google actually decide what goes where, right? How does Bing decide what goes where? DuckDuckGo, I guess. I think a lot of people, like I kind of have like a just enough knowledge to be dangerous about it doing paid stuff, right? But I think a lot of my listeners, maybe have like a very rudimentary understanding of how, kind of these search engines work. And then, I know that inside of like SEO, there's like multiple disciplines. Could you kind of touch on those and then kind of relate how like your kind of on-page content experience fits into that whole spectrum of SEO services?
Sure. So and people argue with me on this too, but I see SEO as having three pillars essentially. So on page, sort of like anything that has to do with keyword research, keyword implementation, and structuring, whether it's a blog article or just a page on your website around that keyword and best practices. That's one pillar. So then we have off-page SEO, which is like anything that has to do with things like creating backlinks, people linking to you, people, mentioning you. Some people say that there is sort of an indirect influence that comes from social media in terms of things like mentions, brand mentions, and, just people sharing your stuff, because that could inevitably lead to backlinks, but the connection is not super secure, but something to think about. And then the last pillar is like the technical structure of your website. Does it load fast? Does it scale nicely for mobile? Are you using HTTPS, which makes your website more secure? And Google lets us know sometimes what ranking signals we should be paying attention to. And sometimes they even give us dates as to when they will come into effect. But sometimes it's more of a guess. And so the best thing you can do to make sure that you have all these pillars right is to follow the blogs, the thought leaders, things like Search Engine Journal or Moz or Ahrefs or, any of these software companies or SEO individuals who are actually doing experiments to figure it out. Because as most people well know, Google doesn't really tell us much. So we latch on to what they do tell us, and then we extrapolate for the rest of it.
Right. Yeah. It's more like kind of doing structured experiments that go into a black box, if you will.
Right. Exactly.
So basically, where we're at is we have these three pillars. You are a master of the on page. You said that that has to do with keywords and keyword research. Like, what exactly goes into that? What makes good keyword research? How do you decide which keywords to pick? All of those sort of things, kind of, and like, you kind of gave some context with like the sales funnel and things like that. But yeah, if you could go a little more in depth.
Totally. So when you start keyword research, the common advice in the past was to use Google Keyword Planner, which is their AdWords tool, as you're very well aware of, Jeremy. But the problem with using Google Keyword Planner is, well, the reason people use it is because it's free, or it's free if you have an AdWords account. Now it's a little bit harder to access than it once was. But I think you actually can't even access it unless you're doing paid campaigns now. So it's actually really not a viable tool anymore.
It's for me.
But what I'm trying to get at is...
But yeah, I think you do have to have active campaigns though, like in order to be able to use it, because I just use it under my own account for my website.
Right. So the problem with that tool from an on-page SEO perspective is that it relates to paid keywords, but it doesn't necessarily reflect on organic results. And it can be a great tool for discerning like commercial intent, because you can see how much you have to bid for certain keywords and things like that. And you can also see the difficulty of being able to, rank for those keywords in terms of your paid campaigns, like what the competition would be for actually bidding, competing, whatever. But like I said, the numbers don't necessarily translate to an organic perspective. So what would be a better tool to use would be something like SEMrush or SEMrush, however you say it, or Ahrefs. I prefer Ahrefs, but I've recently started playing with SEMrush. And I know it also has a lot of implications for the paid social type stuff. So if somebody is doing paid social and organic social, a tool like SEMrush would be better. But I like Ahrefs for the keyword research functionalities, even more so than any of their other tools that they offer, because they just have so much data. And so when it comes to picking a keyword, what I look at probably first before anything else is the ranking difficulty of being able to actually rank for that keyword on your website. And so Ahrefs can tell you, this is kind of the authority of your website. Some people call it domain authority. Ahrefs calls it domain rating, basically a scale from 1 to 100 that gets exponentially harder to get to 100 the closer you get to it.
Right. So that would mean like the jump from 20 to 30 is simpler than the jump from 80 to 90.
Right. Kind of like the clout score of the past.
Right. Oh yeah, I remember clout scores. Yeah, those are cool.
I mean, I got some free stuff. It was neat.
Yeah.
But
do people still is that still around at all?
No, they went bankrupt. Or they went out of business, I should say. So anyway, so you look at the keyword difficulty, which tells you, kind of based on this domain rating or domain authority, whatever you want to call it, it tells you if it's realistic that you would be able to rank for that keyword. It even tells you, how many backlinks you would need realistically for your website to rank for that. So for my website, I tend to look for stuff that's under like a 20 difficulty. The lower the better, just because it's low hanging fruit. And then after that, I consider search volume. If it's under 10, I don't mess around with it. If it's over 10, I consider it, because depending on how specific that keyword is, that could be a really valuable keyword to be ranking at the top for, even though the vanity metric of traffic seems low. But, it's always better to get, 5 qualified visitors than it is to get 1,000 unqualified visitors.
Right. Definitely. That's the golden rule with paid as well. So I guess, kind of putting myself in the shoes of one of my listeners, somebody that really has a very loose idea of what SEO is. How would you even, when you're doing keywords research, how do you even know where to start looking for keywords? Right. And, I guess to use an example, if I was a lawyer, right? Like, how would I even know where to start? Like, because these tools are great at helping you take, a handful of phrases or something like that and like exponentially blowing them out. But if I'm starting from zero, what does that look like when you're just kind of musing on a new business? How do you get into the right mindset, and the questions do you ask? in order to be able to start that keyword research, to build that list so that you can figure out what to go after?
So I think that before you attempt any sort of like targeted on page SEO work, you need to have a solid understanding of who your customer is, or at least have an idea in your mind that you can test. And then you also have to have a solid understanding of who your competition is, even if it's inexact competition, but still somebody who targets a very similar audience. And so, armed with this knowledge, you can go to your favorite SEO tool, Ahrefs and SEMrush or SEMrush. I can never say either of them right, but
I say them completely different as well.
and I
So
yeah,
it's
every time I talk. But both of them have really impressive sort of like competitor analysis tools where, for example, just because I'm more familiar with Ahrefs, they have a content gap analysis. So you can plug in URLs to determine what kind of topics that your website covers, that, you know, there's other opportunities comparing it to like these competitor websites. Like, here's stuff that you haven't covered yet, but that maybe you can rank for, something to look into. And there's different ways to compare the data in terms of like these competitor content gaps type things. So I would say if you're just totally lost at what to do, look at the competition and get ideas.
okay, interesting. So this is definitely like that. I think it was Picasso that said, "Good artists create, great artists steal." Right. So if you're having trouble kind of figuring out where to start, go to one of your competitors, go to their website, like start looking at the sort of articles they're writing, the sort of pages that they've got, plug those into some of these tools, and then that tool will like then come up with, use those handful of phrases to come up with thousands, and then you can narrow down based on the criteria earlier you said of difficulty and volume in order to figure out where opportunities are to kind of attack.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So let's kind of go. I think we kind of got an idea of the keyword research. So now let's say, I've got my keywords. I have like a pretty loose understanding of SEO. I know I've got to start making content. How does one actually write a good piece of SEO content?
So the thing that you want to keep in mind is that it's the search engine spider who is presenting the content, but it's a human who is reading it and acting on it. And so the best way to satisfy the search engine spider is by using on-page SEO tools such as Yoast, which is a WordPress plugin. It's like one of the top 5 WordPress plugins just because it's so simple but effective. And essentially how it works is you just plug in your keyword on Yoast and it gives you suggestions like, oh, make sure you use this in the URL slug, make sure you use this in the meta title, aim for a certain density of using the keyword within the content. And these are all generalizations. It's not that you have to follow all of them. It's just that they are good things to keep in mind as you're writing and to check you as you're, finishing up your draft. The one thing that you need to keep in mind when using a tool like Yoast is that Yoast can't confirm whether or not a keyword is good. It can only confirm if you've been using it in terms of SEO best practices.
Right. So Yoast isn't going to say like, you're totally going to rank for this, and this is a super easy keyword with a lot of volume and everybody's going to be qualified. All it can say is you're technically implementing this correctly.
Right. You did the best you could.
Yeah, you tried. Thumbs up. Yeah, no, but okay, that's fair enough, right? That's definitely part of the equation.
So the other part, and this is actually something that Yoast can help you with, although I would say that it's not the be all end all of the topic, is readability. So when you're writing for that human writer, you have to be thinking about the formatting specifically. So short sentences, short paragraphs. You want to aim to get that person to just keep scrolling down. So you've got to use images, screenshots, video where appropriate, which can also help, in small ways with SEO. I like, incorporating like GIFs or GIFs, whatever makes you happy.
It's GIF.
I like GIF.
I am going to challenge you on that. I don't know if it's Ahrefs or what, but I will. I'm going to push back on GIF.
So like making sure that you have like white space and you're kind of guiding that person's eyes down, because you're not just like presenting them with blocks of text that overwhelm them. I love just to make sure that I'm spelling things right and using proper grammar. I love Grammarly. I pay for that tool, but they have a pretty good free tool too. Like I said, Yoast has a very basic readability check. It checks for like the Fleisch, whatever reading score, talking about like how difficult it would be for somebody to read. I tend not to pay too much attention to that just because I'm all for people like trying to learn bigger words than they're used to. I don't like to, pander to the lowest common denominator, even though Yoast tells me I should.
For sure. But that said though, like I'm super guilty of this, right? And I think that one of these things that you're kind of getting at is a lot of us tend to use super I speak in an incredible amount of jargon. Kind of paid digital ads is almost a world unto itself in regards to that stuff, right? Especially as you get more into the higher end traffic publisher stuff and like the actual ad ops sort of things. And so, I think that those tools are useful. And I see this a lot with clients too, actually, is they'll start using jargon, just talking about their profession, and that's fine. But they got to remember that they're presenting this, maybe not for the first time to somebody, but somebody that has a very, very limited knowledge, So I think that that's definitely useful to call out, right?
Totally. I think that anytime that you use a specialized word, you need to spend time talking about what it is, even if your audience is specialized. And one thing that some people forget is defining acronyms. So, like, SEO might not be something that we need to define anymore just because it's like so widely understood by people who aren't necessarily digital marketers, at least in terms of, the generalities of what it is. But something like ESP, email service provider, like that's something that I would define whether or not I'm talking to a specialized audience just because it's so specific.
Right. Well, yeah, that's like a big one with me is like ROAS, right? Which is return on ad spend, and what is that versus ROI? Actually, I could probably add a whole section of my website that would crush it on SEO, another acronym, right? Just defining marketing acronyms with like a brief like explanation, right? Like and I might do that now, but no, but in all seriousness, yeah, I think that like every profession has a ton of jargon, and then there's like we also tend to like make like leaps too, like you know what I mean, like assume an underlying knowledge that won't exist. Yeah. So is there any kind of like mindset or best practices or anything, like how does one balance between being an expert, I guess, and not overwhelming somebody with kind of specialized knowledge, right? Like industry jargon and things like that. How do you strike that? How do you like kind of guide the brands that you work with to strike that sort of balance? How do you, what's the best way, I guess, to approach making approachable content?
Sure. I think it's definitely good. First of all, any concept, just make sure to define it, even if it's just a simple definition. To take that to the next level, you might link to articles that are totally about that concept and say, if this is unfamiliar to you and you want to learn more, check out this article. And as you should be using high authority external links in your content anyway, this is a great way to kind of build that in. Another thing you might do is use like call out boxes in your content to talk about the concept in more detail, but then also to kind of warn that more advanced reader, hey, if you already know what this concept is, go ahead and skip to like past this box. So using cues within the text, to kind of accommodate any level of reader.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a good idea. Okay, cool. So we've kind of talked a lot about SEO and on page at a high level, and I super thank you for all of your deep insights that you've gotten from your years of excellent work. What's a couple of things that you see people screwing up a lot or that they could be doing better that all of our listeners out there could like walk away and do today, right? Like in, a relatively quick amount of time.
Totally. I think like the easiest way to improve your writing, even from like a non-technical standpoint, is put yourself in the customer's shoes and read your text, not as somebody who is, proud of what you've written, but as somebody who would be the target customer that it's supposed to be helping. And ask yourself, does this answer all of the frequently asked questions about the topic? Are there any concepts like we just talked about that might be over their head that I could get more in depth into. And ultimately, is this something that's even interesting to read? Is this something that's worth reading, worth sharing? Does this satisfy a need for my target audience? And if you can't honestly say yes, then you need to do some work.
Okay, fair enough. So basically, just empathy is what I'm hearing. Like,
Absolutely.
more time empathetic with your writing and stop viewing your writing as an extension of yourself. Just take a step back and view it for what it is, which is, a piece of content that's supposed to reach your target audience.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to get perspective if you work at a company and you have a team where you can kind of pass it off to other people to do that sort of litmus test. It's a lot harder to do when you're the sole content creator or you don't have like an editor to work with. But by just allowing yourself to think about that perspective instead of just, reading it without having a perspective at all, you can be your own editor for sure.
Right. Yeah. And you don't have to be perfect to do this. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like, even just a little bit of introspection can take you a long ways in improving the quality of your content?
Totally. And I think another thing along the lines of being perfect is blog posts. It's not like print journalism where once it's out there, it's out there. You can't change it. You kind of have to own up to your mistakes. But with blog content, it's inherently something that you can edit and you can change it. And so one of the mistakes I see a lot of people make is getting too in their heads and overwhelmed before hitting publish on something that they're working on, especially if they're new to it. But the beautiful thing about online writing is that you can change it at any time. And if you change and if you no longer agree with something you said, then you can just take it off, or you can update it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and it's kind of a funny thing. It's like something that I do to myself, even with my video content and things like that, where a lot of people, I think, yeah, you're right. They get into their own heads, and I've done it to myself. But you know what? I posted a video the other day that had just something that was wrong in it. And I just typed up a quick comment on YouTube and was like, hey, I actually totally screwed this up. Do it this way instead, pinned it to the top. And everybody was super like, I actually got a better response from that. They're like, thank you for owning that. Like, that's super cool that you're willing to call yourself out and stuff. So
people love transparency. It's better to be an imperfect human and to own it than to pretend like you're hot shit when you can't support it, And we're all human.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Well, most of us. I don't know. There might be some of our listeners out there that are like dogs overhearing this on like the radio or something. Okay, cool. So I got a couple of questions from the mailbag. So I'm super interested in SEO because it's low budget marketing. I'm trying to turn a side project app into a business, but it's going to need to reach people first. Do I have to make any sort of monetary investment to make SEO work?
I mean, I think it depends on like what skills that you bring to the table. Certainly, a lot of this can be learned. I didn't go to school for this. This is something that I picked up along the way. So if you're willing to invest the time, I guess it depends on how you value your time and, how much room you have in your brain for a new skill if you're already, working on another project. I mean, the beauty of SEO compared to something like PPC is that if you can rank and you can, continuously update your articles and continuously add authority to your domain to help keep it up there, it's something that can last forever. Whereas pay-per-click is something that's more, demand generation for a specific period of time. Once you turn it off, unfortunately, you don't get more leads. Maybe those people still will come back to you or whatever. But with organic search, if you do it right, there's no guarantees, unfortunately. But if you do it right, yes, it can, continue to benefit you. And so it is a great investment.
Absolutely. I think that is very true. PPC, it can be affordable, but there's plenty of experimentation that goes on in PPC. I don't want to say that there isn't because that's a core part of the process, but definitely there's more margin for error if you're not using PPC. So that makes sense.
They work best hand in hand. There are benefits to doing paid and organic efforts that relate to each other at the same time. The only issue is once you turn it off, it's off.
Right. That's interesting. Okay. So this is one, it says, I have a small but mighty firm and I'm looking for low cost ways to acquire new clients. We're on Squarespace, so we have zero SEO. Do you have anything to help with that? Now that's actually an interesting. I think that's a interesting fallacy that I see a lot, and we actually talked about this the other day. It is like platform. Maybe this is like we could use this question as a good kind of like springboard into like the platform debate, if you will. Is there like objectively good platforms, bad platforms? What's kind of your perspective on that?
It all depends on what you're measuring. So, Squarespace on its own is totally fine. It's going to cover all your basic on page needs and probably several technical needs, maybe not all of them, mostly because Squarespace is not open source software in that you can, create your own extensions for it. And then, the other thing with Squarespace is the platform kind of controls, how you can design your website. I mean, you can customize templates and things like that, but you ultimately are limited by a sense of control. Whereas a platform like WordPress is open source. So, individuals contribute to the core code, they contribute themes, plugins that extend its functionality. There's certain aspects of WordPress, the way the software is built, where the code is clean and lean, and so that makes it a little faster to load. And then you have platforms like Wix, which have gotten a pretty bad rap in the past for SEO, and they have since made a lot of changes to be more compliant in terms of on-page and technical things. Still several things to be desired from platforms like Wix and Squarespace, but in general, if you know what you're doing, you can totally rank using those platforms. I think the issue with platforms where you lose control is that they can't really grow with you. And so inevitably, you hit it big and you want to use your website to be more of a cornerstone of your lead generation efforts. That's when you're going to have problems with Wix and Squarespace over, a website platform like WordPress, where it's really the world's your oyster.
That makes a lot of sense. So what I'm kind of hearing is that Squarespace, it's totally possible to rank with Squarespace and Wix, and it's a fallacy that you can't. However, if you're making SEO a cornerstone of your strategy and things like that, you might want to consider something that's a little bit more customizable.
Right. And WordPress also has so much built-in support in terms of plugins like Yoast, which can help you with technical things like generating your sitemap dynamically as you change pages, giving you access to edit the robots.txt file, which just says what you want Google to crawl and what you don't want Google to crawl. One thing, I recently did a deep dive into Wix SEO just because I was curious, how it's changed and just to have an objective opinion about it. One thing that was a little bit worrisome to me is that they suggest SEO plugins on their main landing pages about, how they help with SEO, but 2 out of the 3 are now defunct, but it's still on their website. And so to me, that just, it's laziness, but it's also worrisome. It's can you really support the claims you make? And in general, I think they can, but I think that the fact that they aren't up to date is something that is especially worrisome in a field like SEO where things change literally every day.
Right. Yeah. Google pushes an algorithm update and the world ends for some people. Cool. All right. Got a few more here. So interactive content ideas for me, always trying to think of out of the box ideas to capture attention with blogging. So what's some more creative things that you've seen? Because you kind of touched on this earlier. Don't just have big blocks of text and stuff like that. But what are some of the more creative pieces of written content you've seen? And, is there anything that you think that our audience could emulate?
Totally. I think GIFs are the easy, low effort sort of way. I don't know if you'd call that interactivity, but just attention grabbing. I think more of a high level way to do that, and something that I've been experimenting with lately, is using lead generation quizzes that take the form of a personality test or a knowledge test type thing. And so I've been playing around with a tool called Interact, and it integrates beautifully with WordPress, but you could use it on other platforms as well. And it provides a lot of interesting analytics data and templates and stuff so that you can build out, really engaging questions and things like that. So, based on a lot of their customers' own data, it's a pretty effective way to be gathering emails, more so than the average sort of lead magnet type thing.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I think that those are some super good ideas. Okay, and then one last question here. I've been putting together an affiliate site for products within a very particular trait. What is the best way to accomplish getting customers to click these without being overly salesy?
I think it helps to create content that's like a review of it, but making sure that you don't only talk about what's so great about it. You could say, like, here's my frustrations with this product. Here are some things that I hope they fix someday, or, that this other product does better, just so that you come across as somebody who's more objective and who is genuinely trying to provide the best information. I think a focus on that, just being genuine and being transparent, is always the best way to go forward.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of interesting tactics around how to do affiliate links right. And I actually even saw one influencer go so far as he would post the affiliate link and then the non affiliate link right next to it and call it out. I don't know if that might be a little extreme, but there's definitely like you said, just be honest about that you're using affiliate links and
Right. That's important disclosure.
yeah, be honest about that. And then number two, like you said, right? Just like don't write an unabashedly salesy thing and that's just gushing about all the good stuff and brushing over the bad. The more honest you are, the people see that and they trust it. So, well, I always end. Is there anything that you want to pitch right now? I always let my guests pitch in the last like minute or two of the episode. Anything you want to put out into the world, just go for it.
Okay. Well, in terms of something that would be relevant, I am trying out a new service where I build out your content calendar for a year and do all the keyword research, find the feature images, write like a brief for the topic, and even give you a suggested title. And so what happens is I'm charging $999 for the service, but if you buy it, you can use it as a credit towards my writing services. So if you actually work with me for writing, you can get it for free.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
But you do
Okay.
have to pay for it ahead of time.
And so, yeah, and your website to go contact you about this would be?
The-blogsmith.com. And then if you look under my services, there's one specifically about the content calendar. And you can also see a page that's more about my content writing services as well.
Fantastic. I'll post that link in the description as well. Well, Maddy Osman, thank you so incredibly much. This has been an illuminating journey through on-page SEO. I've seen you work your magic before. You're clearly an expert. If you've been listening to this episode, there's so many valuable takeaways that Maddy has graciously given away here. Ignore them, ignore that value, leave it on the table at your own risk. Maddy, thank you so much again for joining us.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Have a good one, everybody, and happy marketing.